Hey y'all, it's Laura and I'm here to review my audiobook arcs from the month of September. First of all, this video is not sponsored. Second of all, these books were provided for my review use only. Enjoyment was not guaranteed, as you'll see. Libro.fm is basically like, comparable to Scribd or Audible or even Libby. However, it is a paid subscription service monthly. You get a credit, you get an audiobook, it's yours. As much as anything you buy digitally can be yours. But the cool thing about Libro.fm, if you're like me and you're like, I'm tired of supporting big box companies that are like making billions of dollars every single week, Libro.fm works with your local independent bookstores to provide you books. A small portion of the profit does go to your local store. You get to pick what your local store is. So for me, I chose Tattered Cover, which is here locally in Denver. You could do The Strand, Books of Wonder, The Last Bookstore, like whatever you really want to do. You can change it up each month, whatever. Something new they started is an audiobook listening copy program. So they're providing early copies of audiobooks to teachers, educators, influencers. So if you would like to join Libro.fm, you can use my link down below with the code to get your first month at a discount. I don't get a commission if you use my link, but if enough people do, then I get like a free credit. So in September, they offered 7 audiobooks for you to choose from. You could download however many you wanted. You could download them through the end of the month, and then you get to keep them for ever-ish. They did add another book halfway through the month. I haven't gotten a chance to listen to that one yet, but I did go ahead and download it. So the options were Frankly in Love by David Yoon, Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky, Make It Scream, Make It Burn by Leslie Jameson, Red of the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson, The Gracier by Kim Liggett, The World That We Knew by Alice Hoffman, and This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. Of those 7, I chose these 5 because I thought I had the most interest in common with them. I do want to get into Alice Hoffman, but I think I want to start with like Practical Magic or the one about the marriage. That one, start with some of her older titles first. I knew that This Tender Land would be like a very big literary fiction title, which is why I avoided it. I started with Frankly in Love, and oh my goodness, and this just like was in the middle of me reading a bunch of fake dating books, and this book does have an element of fake dating, but I wouldn't say that's the primary objective, the primary plot point. So the main character, Frank Lee, is a first-generation American of Korean immigrant parents. And he is struggling with his cultural identity, and he talks about it a lot throughout the book in different situations of how, like, his friends will say that they're European American, and he's like, yeah, but they don't have to do that because they're just white now. He has to say he's Asian American, he's Korean American. He always has a dash something else in the middle of who he is. So he's still struggling with his identity. He's dealing with his last year of high school and where he's going to go for college, and like, parental expectations of like achieving and being the best, while also wanting to date this white girl and knowing his parents would never approve. So he and one of his best friends, Joy, decide to pretend to fake date because they're both Korean American and their parents will love that, so that they both, Frank and Joy, can date who they want to date. Chaos ensues and a lot of things happen, and it deals with a lot of like grief. There's a lot of racism as well from his parents, and so it's addressed by Frank in his head, but it's not addressed like on page, like saying like, hey, this is wrong, and it doesn't really quite turn around. And the narrator, Raymond J. Lee, just reminds me of like Lin-Manuel Miranda. I don't know if it's the cadence or the voice or like where the emphasis is placed, but just know that it'll sound like Lin-Manuel, which isn't a problem. The next book I read was Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson, which is a multi-generational story of growing up and your parental expectations. We have a lot about parental expectations and society and who you are. So it's told in multiple time periods as well, starting back like, with her grandmother in like, Tulsa in like the early 1900s, and her mother growing up in Brooklyn, and then the main daughter growing up in Brooklyn. Unfortunately, I don't remember any of the characters' names. It was very short. This one was a 3-hour audiobook. I enjoyed it because it was a full cast of characters. I like it. I like Jacqueline Woodson's books. I like the way she looks at families and the cycles of like what happens to you, and is it destiny, is it fate. I then read The Gracier by Kim Liggett, and I would describe this as a Handmaid's Tale meets Lord of the Flies. Society is very regulated. It reminds me very much of Amish society. Women aren't allowed to dream, women are allowed to hum, they're not allowed to talk unless their husbands are there. They keep doing it because they keep living and surviving, so they're not going to change anything. So when the girls turn about 15 or 16, once they've had their blood, they actually have to change their ribbons from when they're children, like from a white ribbon to a red ribbon once they've bled. Like, you don't need to know. So that's a whole thing. But when they turn 16, it's believed that there's all this magic in their bodies and they need to go get it out so that they don't tempt anyone, and they just to free themselves and purify themselves so that they come back and can get married. However, during this time when they're out at this camp compound basically and like hunting in the woods, there's these poachers that are trying to like take little bits of their skin and their organs and their body parts, and then they sell them back to the same county to their family It believes it's an aphrodisiac, that it makes you younger, etc, etc. So it's not quite as magical as you might think it is. It's definitely much more of a psychological, like what's going on in these girls' heads. It definitely surprised me. It wasn't a book I had on my radar until I downloaded it here. I enjoyed the audiobook experience. It was, you know, level, it was steady, it got me through it. I enjoyed it. The next one I DNF'd. So that was Make It Scream, Make It Burn by Leslie Jameson, read by the author, which is always like, oh, I'm sorry, but like both your book and your voice are not my cup of tea. That's just so, I'm so sorry, but that's like how I felt. I enjoy essays. I enjoy essays written by multiple people. I enjoy essays by one individual, like Shrill by Lindy West or The Geek Feminist Revolution by Cameron Hurley. I couldn't get into this. All of the topics were just so disparate. I just was like, how do these relate? It's supposed to deal with obsession and longing, and it's kind of more of like a journalistic editorial story view of it, of like, oh, this is how people feel about, you know, the whale that like communicates on a different like decibel than like every other whale, and so it's lonely, it's the loneliest whale. And so it talks about that and the scientific research behind it, but also how people react to it and how they felt learning about this whale. But then it would switch to a different story about like the Confederate War photography and how that was staged, and I couldn't get into it. So I got about 30% of the way through. Perhaps I'll go back to it, but not anytime soon. And the final book that took me for freaking ever was Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. This is a 24-hour audiobook. I listened at 1.75 speed. It still took me like 3 weeks to get through. Like, oh my goodness. This is the first book he's put out since The Perks of Being a Wallflower in the 90s. He's done a lot of screenwriting and editing and things like that, and this is his first book. It's 720 pages, so just keep that in mind. It is adult horror. His last book was YA contemporary coming of age, so keep that in mind as well. It's definitely a different genre. I'd say I like the beginning quarter of the book. The beginning quarter of the book follows this boy Christopher and his mother, who are running away from a man who is abusing his mother, and they settle in this small Pennsylvania town. She's a single mother, single working parent. His father actually killed himself in a bathtub many years ago, so there's a lot of trauma around the family, and she's always just trying to do the best for her son. He has dyslexia, he has some learning difficulties, he has trouble making friends, and also with like the fact that like he hasn't been able to buy new shoes or new clothes, and he's being teased and bullied. And so then he suddenly disappears for 6 days and comes back a genius, and he goes on an adventure with his new friends to build a treehouse, and they don't know why, just because the nice man told them so. It becomes a whole battle for good versus evil set against this small Pennsylvania town, and the sheriff gets involved, and all of the different kids from his class and their parents, and what their struggles and their insecurities and what they've suffered from. And overall, it had many religious overtones, very much of the Christian flavor. It also had a lot of abuse and neglect and violence towards women that was really unnecessary. So I gave it a 2 stars just because it took me so long. I know why people like it. I see the appeal. Alright, so those are the books that I picked. It also took me a lot longer to finish all the audiobooks. Like, I started September, like probably like 3rd or so, and I didn't finish the last book until October 8th. And those were the only audiobooks. I didn't get anything else from Libby, from my library, or anything else from Audible or anything else. So these were the only audiobooks I was listening to, and it still took quite a while. So I will see how October goes. I really enjoyed this experience of getting audiobooks early, because typically like you'll get book arcs first, or even like graphic novels, but they're not quite finished. Like there still might be a cover change, or especially with the graphic novel like arcs, like the first like 10 or 15 pages may be like in color and inked and painted, and the rest are all in black and white, so it's not quite the full experience. So this was pretty much the full experience. That's all from me. I will see y'all next time. Bye y'all.